She was just a poor candy seller struggling to survive. He was a powerful millionaire, untouched by fate, until their worlds collided. One glance, one moment, and everything changed. Love wasn't meant for them, yet destiny had other plans. This is the story of a love that defied all odds. A cold night, a warm smile. The streets of New York shimmered under the golden glow of streetlights, but the night was cruel. A cold wind howled through the city, making people clutch their coats tighter as they hurried home. Amid the chaos, a small figure stood on the sidewalk, her hands trembling from the icy air as she arranged colorful candies in a tiny wooden cart. Lily Carter exhaled, watching her breath turn to mist. Her fingers ached from the cold, but she couldn't go home yet, not until she sold enough candies to buy her mother's medicine. Each piece of candy was made with love, a recipe passed down from her grandmother, but love alone wouldn't fill an empty stomach. As the night deepened, people passed her by, barely sparing a glance. Her voice, though sweet and gentle, was lost in the noise of honking cars and hurried footsteps. That's when he saw her. A gaze that changed everything from the warmth of his sleek black car. Alexander Reed observed the fragile girl standing alone, her big hazel eyes filled with hope, as she tried to sell her handmade candies. Alexander was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and influence. Yet, as he sat in his luxurious car, staring at the girl with wind-blown auburn hair and a resilience that defied the cold, something stirred within him. He wasn't sure what it was: pity, admiration, an inexplicable pull. "Stop the car," he commanded his driver. Stepping out, his expensive shoes clicked against the pavement as he approached the girl. The wind tousled his perfectly styled dark hair, and his deep blue eyes softened as he watched her shiver, but still smile at every passerby. An unforgettable first meeting. Lily was about to give up for the night when she saw a tall, well-dressed man walking toward her. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron, trying to make herself presentable. "Would you like to buy some candy, sir?" she asked, offering him her brightest smile. Alexander looked down at the tiny, colorful treats arranged on a tray. They weren't extravagant, like the chocolates sold in his luxury stores, yet there was something special about them, something real. "How much for all of them?" His deep voice cut through the night. Lily blinked, taken aback. All of them?" He nodded. "Yes." She hesitated. "But I have over 50 pieces here." "I didn't ask how many," he said with a faint smile. "I asked how much." Lily swallowed, confused but grateful. "It would be $20 for all of them." Without hesitation, Alexander pulled out a $100 bill and placed it in her hand. "Keep the change." Lily gasped. "Sir, this is too much." "It's not," he interrupted. "Consider it a small appreciation for your hard work." For a moment, Lily just stared at him. In her world, kindness was rare, and generosity even rarer. Who was this man? Why would someone like him, dressed in an expensive black coat, his watch gleaming under the streetlights, care about a poor girl selling candy? Alexander turned to leave, but then he paused. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered softly. He nodded. "I'm Alexander." And with that he walked away, leaving Lily standing there, her heart pounding for reasons she didn't understand. A night of questions. As Alexander's car disappeared into the city, Lily clutched the $100 bill, warmth spreading through her frozen fingers. She had met countless people on these streets, but none like him. Who was Alexander? And why did his gaze feel like it had seen right through her soul? Little did she know, this was only the beginning. A taste that lingers. Alexander Reed sat in his penthouse apartment, the city skyline stretching endlessly before him. His luxurious home had everything: a glass ceiling that revealed the stars, a bar stocked with the finest whiskey, and silence so deep it could swallow him whole. Yet, all he could think about was a girl selling candies on a cold street. He unwrapped one of the candies he had bought from Lily and placed it on his tongue. The moment it melted in his mouth, he was stunned. The sweetness was unlike anything he had ever tasted, not the artificial luxury of high-end chocolates, but something richer, something nostalgic. It tasted like home, like a forgotten warmth, like childhood. He closed his eyes, a rare smile playing on his lips. Who was this girl, and how did she manage to create something so pure? He needed to see her again. An unexpected visit. Lily was back at her usual spot the next evening, carefully arranging her candies. The sky had turned a soft shade of pink, and the city's golden lights were beginning to flicker on. She had almost convinced herself that last night had been a dream until she saw him again. Alexander walked toward her, his hands in his pockets, his sharp features calm yet unreadable. The expensive coat he wore made him look even more out of place in the crowd of hurried commuters, yet he moved with effortless confidence. Lily's heart skipped a beat. "You're back," she blurted out. Before she could stop herself, he raised an eyebrow. Surprised, she hesitated, then nodded. "People like you don't usually come back." Alexander's lips curved slightly. "People like me." Lily flushed, realizing how that sounded. "I mean, rich people. You probably have better things to do than buy candy from a street seller." Alexander leaned against the lamppost, watching her closely. "Maybe, but your candy is the best thing I've tasted in years." Lily blinked in shock. "You're joking." "I don't joke about good food." His voice was smooth, but there was something genuine in his expression. Lily felt warmth spread through her chest. No one had ever complimented her candies like that before. Most people barely noticed her. "So Lily," he continued, his gaze never leaving her, "tell me, how do you make them?" She hesitated, glancing at him warily. "Why do you want to know?" He shrugged. "Curiosity and admiration." Lily wasn't sure how to react to that. No one had ever admired her for anything before. But then something in his eyes, an honest interest, not pity, made her heart soften. "I learned from my grandmother," she admitted. "She used to say that candy should taste like happiness, not just sugar." Alexander tilted his head. "And what does happiness taste like to you?" Lily smiled softly, her fingers absent-mindedly running over the candy trays. "Like childhood, like sitting by the fireplace on a winter night, like love." Alexander studied her for a long moment. "That's why your candy is special," he murmured. "Because it has a story, a sweet challenge." As the night deepened, their conversation flowed effortlessly. Lily found herself telling him about her mother's illness, her struggles, her dreams of one day opening a small candy shop. Alexander listened, really listened, and then, out of nowhere, he made an offer. "I want to help you." Lily froze. "Help me? You're talented. You deserve more than just a street corner." Lily's heart pounded. It sounded like a dream, but dreams didn't come true for girls like her. She took a step back, crossing her arms. "I don't need pity, Alexander." "It's not pity," he said calmly. "It's respect." But Lily wasn't convinced. "Fine," she said suddenly, fire in her eyes. "Let's make a deal." Alexander smirked. "I'm listening. For one day, I'll sell my candy next to one of your fancy stores," she challenged. "If more people buy from me, you'll admit that my sweets are better." Alexander chuckled, intrigued. "And if they don't, then I'll accept your help." He held out a hand. "Deal." Lily shook it, and for a second, she felt a spark, something electric, something she didn't understand. As she watched Alexander walk away, a strange feeling settled in her chest. This man was trouble. But why did she feel like her life was about to change forever? The challenge begins. Lily could hardly sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alexander's confident smirk, heard his deep voice saying, "Deal." She had challenged a millionaire, a man who owned some of the most luxurious confectionery stores in the city. What was she thinking? Morning arrived, crisp and golden. Lily stood outside Reed's Confections, one of Alexander's high-end chocolate boutiques. The building was sleek, elegant, with massive glass windows, showcasing handcrafted truffles and imported sweets. A doorman in a black uniform greeted customers as they walked in, each of them dressed in expensive coats and carrying designer bags. And then there was Lily, standing beside her small wooden cart, her candies wrapped in simple paper bags. Alexander arrived precisely at noon, stepping out of his car with effortless grace. Dressed in a tailored navy coat, he looked like he belonged in a world of power and prestige. But when his blue eyes met Lily's, there was something else there: curiosity, amusement, and maybe admiration. "You're early," he said, hands in his pockets. "So are you," Lily shot back, lifting her chin. He smirked. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." Lily took a deep breath. "Then let's get started." The Battle of Sweets. The street buzzed with life. Wealthy customers walked in and out of Reed's Confections, while Lily stood by her cart, calling out to passers-by. Handmade candies, sweet, soft, and made with love. At first no one stopped. People barely spared her a glance. Alexander leaned against the store's entrance, watching with an amused expression. "You sure you don't want to give up now?" Lily shot him a glare. "Not a chance." Then something changed. An elderly woman, with a kind smile, slowed her steps, eyeing Lily's candy. "What flavors do you have, dear?" Lily lit up. "Strawberry, caramel, honey, but my special one is cinnamon apple. It's my grandmother's recipe." The woman's face softened. "Cinnamon apple reminds me of my childhood." Lily grinned. "Then I promise you, it'll taste just like home." The woman bought a small bag. Then a young couple approached. Then a mother with her son. Word spread fast. People passing by took notice of the girl with the bright smile and the tiny wooden cart. They didn't just buy her candy. They stopped to talk, to ask about the story behind each piece. Meanwhile, Alexander's store remained as it always had, pristine, luxurious, but distant. Customers went in, bought their chocolates, and left. But with Lily, it was different. Alexander watched, fascinated. He had built an empire by selling the finest chocolates, yet in just an hour, Lily had done something no marketing strategy ever could. She had made people feel. A moment of realization. As the day went on, Lily's sales soared. By the late afternoon, her cart was nearly empty. She turned to Alexander, breathless. "Looks like I win." Alexander stared at her, a slow smile forming on his lips. "Looks like you do." For the first time, Lily saw something in his eyes, not just amusement, but something deeper: respect, maybe even admiration. "I'll admit it," he said, stepping closer. "Your candy is something special." Lily felt warmth spread through her chest. She had fought and she had won, but more than that, she had earned his respect. She looked at him, her heartbeat unsteady. "So what now?" Alexander was silent for a moment, then said, "Now I make you an offer you can't refuse." Her breath hitched. "What kind of offer?" His voice was softer now, almost intimate. "Come work for me. Let me help you turn your dream into something bigger." Lily hesitated. This was everything she had ever wanted. A chance to have her own shop, to bring her grandmother's recipes to more people. But there was something about Alexander that scared her. Not because he was rich or powerful, but because of the way he looked at her, like she was more than just a candy seller, like she was something more. "Let me think about it," she whispered. Alexander smiled, but there was something unreadable in his gaze. "Take your time." "But I don't lose, Lily," she swallowed, realizing that she wasn't just playing a game anymore. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous, and far more beautiful. A decision that could change everything. Lily lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment. The offer Alexander had made played on repeat in her mind. "Come work for me. Let me help you turn your dream into something bigger." It was everything she had ever wished for. A chance to leave the streets, to make something of herself. But why did it feel so terrifying? Maybe because she knew that stepping into Alexander's world meant stepping into his life, and the way he looked at her, it made her feel things she had no right to feel. Still, she couldn't deny it. She wanted this, and maybe she wanted him too. A new beginning. The next evening, Lily stood outside Reed's Confections, her heart pounding. She had made up her mind. Alexander was waiting for her, leaning casually against his car, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers, as if he had already known what her answer would be. "You're here," he said, his voice smooth but laced with something deeper. Lily took a steadying breath. I want to do this, but on one condition. Alexander raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what's that? I don't want charity, she said firmly. I want to earn my place. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then he let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. You really are something else, Lily. He took a step closer, so close she could see the flicker of amusement, and something far more intense in his gaze. I wouldn't have it any other way, he murmured. Lily swallowed hard. She had just agreed to work with the most powerful man she had ever met, and something told her she had no idea what she was getting herself into. The first lesson Alexander took her inside one of his factories, a pristine high-tech facility where his luxury chocolates were crafted. The scent of melted cocoa filled the air, warm and intoxicating. Lily's eyes widened. She had never seen anything like it. Impressed, Alexander asked, watching her reaction. She nodded, turning to him. I had no idea chocolate making could be so scientific. Alexander smirked. That's because you make your candy with heart. I make mine with precision. Lily tilted her head. Is that a bad thing? His smirk faltered for just a second before he leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Maybe that's why yours is better. Lily's breath caught. He was too close. She could feel the heat radiating off him, the scent of expensive cologne, mixed with something uniquely him. She forced herself to step back. Then maybe you have something to learn from me. Alexander chuckled. I'm counting on it. An unspoken connection. Days turned into weeks, and Lily found herself growing into her role. Alexander didn't just throw money at her. He challenged her, pushed her to improve her craft, to think beyond what she had known. But what unsettled her the most was how easily he could read her. You're overthinking again, he murmured one evening, as they worked late in the test kitchen. Lily sighed, rubbing her forehead. I want this to be perfect. Alexander reached over, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was brief, but it sent a shiver down her spine. It already is, he said softly. Lily's heart pounded. She knew she was getting too close, letting herself feel too much. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same dangerous emotion reflected back at her. This wasn't just business anymore, and that terrified her. A night of confessions. One evening, after a long day of work, Alexander did something unexpected. Come with me, he said. Lily hesitated. Where? You'll see. She didn't know why she agreed. Maybe it was the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, or the rare vulnerability in his gaze. He drove her to a quiet spot outside the city, a hill overlooking the glittering skyline. The world felt so far away, so still. Lily hugged her arms against the cold breeze. Why did you bring me here? Alexander leaned against the car, staring at the city below. This is where I used to come when I had nothing. Lily's eyes widened. You had nothing? He let out a low laugh. Hard to believe, right? But yeah, I grew up poor, fought my way up, lost a lot in the process. Lily softened. She had never imagined Alexander, the powerful, untouchable businessman, as a boy struggling to survive. For the first time, she saw past the wealth, past the confidence. She saw him. You're not what I expected, she admitted. He turned to her, a shadow of a smile on his lips. Neither are you. The wind whispered around them, but neither moved. They were too close, standing on the edge of something they weren't ready to know. But in that moment, Lily knew this wasn't just about Candy anymore, this was about them. And falling for him might be the most dangerous thing she had ever done. A shift in the air, something had changed after that night on the hill. Lily could feel it in the way Alexander looked at her, the way his gaze lingered just a second too long, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. But she refused to acknowledge it. She couldn't. Falling for a man like Alexander Reed was dangerous. He belonged to a world that was polished, refined and ruthless. She was just a candy seller who had spent her life fighting to survive. And yet, her heart refused to listen. A taste of something more. One evening, they were alone in the test kitchen, experimenting with new flavors. The air was thick with the scent of melted caramel, and cocoa. Lily dipped a spoon into a batch of her homemade cinnamon apple filling and held it out to Alexander. Here, taste this. He raised an eyebrow, but leaned in, letting his lips brush against the spoon as he tasted. The moment stretched between them, the warmth of his breath teasing her fingertips. He swallowed slowly, his blue eyes locked onto hers. It's perfect. Lily felt her pulse race. You're just saying that. Alexander took a step closer. I don't lie, Lily. The intensity in his gaze made her breath hitch. She turned away quickly, busying herself with stirring the chocolate. But she couldn't ignore the heat that lingered in the air, and neither could he. An unexpected date. A few days later, Alexander surprised her. I'm taking you somewhere, he said, handing her a small gift bag. Lily frowned as she peeked inside. A sleek black dress, elegant but simple. What's this for? She asked suspiciously. Alexander smirked. You work for me now, and I take care of my employees. She folded her arms. This looks an awful lot like a bribe. His smirk deepened, then consider it a challenge. Wear it, and if you hate where I take you, I'll let you make me the worst candy you can think of. Lily sighed, but a small smile played on her lips. Fine, but if I regret this, I'm making you eat burnt caramel. A night to remember. When Lily stepped out of her tiny apartment wearing the dress, she saw something she had never seen before. Alexander, completely speechless. His usual smirk disappeared as his eyes roamed over her. You look. His voice was lower, rougher, beautiful. Lily's cheeks warmed. She had never been called that before. He took her to a rooftop restaurant, the city lights twinkling like 1,000 fallen stars around them. As they ate, Lily found herself relaxing, laughing more than she had in years. Alexander wasn't just the confident businessman. He was charming, teasing, and surprisingly gentle. At one point, he leaned forward, his fingers brushing against hers on the table. You know, Lily, I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a night like this. Her breath caught. Like what? He held her gaze. Read. The word sent shivers down her spine. This wasn't just a night out. It was something more, and she wasn't sure she was ready for it. A dance under the stars. As they left the restaurant, music from a nearby street performer floated through the air. Lily smiled. I love this song. Alexander suddenly held out his hand. Dance with me. She laughed. Here, in the middle of the street. He grinned, scared. She huffed. Of course not. But the moment his arms wrapped around her, the world melted away. They swayed slowly, her head barely reaching his chest. The city noises faded, leaving only the soft hum of music and the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in years, Lily felt safe. She looked up, her breath catching at the way Alexander was staring at her, like she was something precious. Lily, he whispered. Her heart pounded. She knew what was coming, but before he could close the distance, before their lips could meet, a voice interrupted them. Alexander read. A man in a sharp suit approached, his expression smug. Didn't expect to see you here. The warmth between them shattered. Alexander's expression turned cold in an instant. His grip on Lily's waist tightened slightly, protectively. The man smirked. A street girl, huh? Didn't think that was your type. Lily's stomach twisted. Alexander's jaw clenched. Watch your mouth. The man laughed. Relax, I was just surprised. You usually go for heiresses, not. That's enough. Alexander cut him off, his voice dangerous. Lily felt suddenly exposed, out of place. The world she had briefly let herself dream about. Maybe it wasn't meant for her. Maybe she wasn't meant for him. Without another word, she stepped away. I should go. Alexander turned to her. Lily, wait. But she was already walking away, ignoring the ache in her chest. She had made a mistake, and she couldn't afford to make it again. Running from the inevitable, Lily's feet moved faster than her heart could process. The moment she stepped away from Alexander, a part of her shattered, but she didn't stop. She had to leave. She had to remind herself that men like Alexander didn't belong in her world, and she certainly didn't belong in his. By the time she reached her tiny apartment, her breath was ragged, her hands trembling as she shut the door behind her. Her reflection in the cracked mirror caught her attention. She still wore the elegant black dress, a dress he had given her, a dress that for one night had made her feel like someone who mattered. Tears burned her eyes. She had let herself believe, and that was her mistake. A man who refuses to let go. Alexander wasn't the kind of man to sit back when something or someone slipped away, especially her. He had felt something tonight, something undeniable. The way Lily had looked at him, the way she had melted in his arms when they danced. It wasn't one-sided. She had felt it too, and he wasn't about to let her run from it. The next morning, Lily opened her door to find Alexander standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee and a small paper bag. Her heart jumped. "What are you doing here?" He smirked, but it wasn't his usual teasing one. This was softer. "You walked away before dessert. I thought I'd make it up to you." Lily hesitated. She should send him away. But the smell of coffee and the way he was looking at her, like she was the only thing that mattered, made it impossible to shut the door in his face. Sighing, she stepped aside. Walls crumbling, they sat on her small couch, the contrast between them obvious. Alexander in his crisp tailored suit, and Lily in an oversized sweater, clutching a chipped mug. "I don't understand you," she admitted, finally, breaking the silence. Alexander tilted his head. "What part?" Lily exhaled. "All of it. You, a billionaire, used to luxury, used to women who don't sell candy on the streets." He frowned. "And what does that mean?" She gestured at herself. "I don't fit into your world." Alexander set his coffee down, his gaze locking onto hers. "And what if I don't want my world anymore?" Lily swallowed hard. "You don't mean that." He leaned forward, his voice a quiet intensity. "Don't I? You think I care about silk tablecloths and fancy parties? Do you know the last time I actually felt something real before I met you?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Lily," he murmured, reaching for her hand. His fingers brushed against hers, sending a shiver up her spine. For a second she almost let herself believe. Almost, but she couldn't. Because people like her didn't get fairy tales. She pulled her hand away. "This, whatever this is, it can't happen." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Why not?" "Because I know how it ends," she whispered. Alexander stood, running a hand through his hair. "You're pushing me away before I even get the chance to prove you wrong." Lily's heart ached, but she forced herself to be strong. "Maybe it's better that way." He stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, I'll go." But just before he reached the door, he turned back, his blue eyes burning into hers. "You can keep running, Lily, but you should know something." His voice was softer now, but no less intense. "I don't give up easily." And with that, he was gone. But his words stayed, and for the first time in years, Lily wasn't sure she wanted to run anymore. A heart that won't listen, Lily told herself she was doing the right thing, that keeping Alexander at a distance was the only way to protect herself. But no matter how much she tried to silence the aching in her heart, it refused to listen. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the way he had looked at her, the way his fingers had brushed against hers, the way his voice had softened when he said her name. She had never been wanted like that before, and it terrified her. Unfinished business. 2 days passed. Lily expected Alexander to stop trying, to forget about her the way rich men forgot about the things that didn't fit into their lives. But she was wrong. Late one evening, as she was packing up her small candy stall, she felt a familiar presence behind her. "You always disappear when I turn my back," came Alexander's deep voice. Her hands froze mid-movement. She didn't have to turn around to know he was watching her. His piercing blue eyes filled with something dangerous, determination. Taking a steady breath, she finally faced him. "You're here again," he smirked. But it wasn't his usual playful one. This one was laced with something else. Something serious. "You didn't actually think I'd give up, did you?" Lily let out a small sigh. "Alexander, this isn't—" "No," he interrupted. stepping closer. No more excuses, Lily. Her breath caught as he invaded her space, his scent wrapping around her, drowning her defenses. Tell me, he murmured, tilting his head. Are you running because you don't feel anything for me, or because you do? The question hit her like a storm. Lily opened her mouth to lie, to tell him it was nothing, that she felt nothing, but her lips trembled, and in that moment, Alexander knew. A kiss that shouldn't have happened. He reached for her, his fingers grazing her cheek. You can keep pushing me away, Lily, but you can't lie to yourself. She sucked in a breath, her heart racing so fast she thought it might break her ribs. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered. His thumb brushed against her lower lip, his gaze darkening. Then stop hurting yourself. Before she could think, before she could stop herself, her hands gripped his shirt. And that was all the invitation Alexander needed. He closed the distance, his lips crashing against hers. The world disappeared. Lily felt everything at once, his warmth, his desperation, his need. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a confession. It was every unspoken word, every stolen glance, every suppressed feeling finally breaking free. She melted into him, her fingers curling into his jacket, as his arms wrapped tightly around her. For the first time she let herself want. But reality was cruel, because the second they broke apart, breathless and shaken, the weight of what she had done crashed over her. She had just made everything worse. A love that scares her. Lily stepped back, her hands trembling. We can't. Alexander's expression darkened. Don't, she shook her head, her heart aching. This isn't our world, Alexander. It's just a moment, and moments don't last. He clenched his jaw, frustration flashing in his eyes. And what if I want more than a moment? She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But she had spent her whole life knowing that fairy tales weren't real. She forced herself to whisper, then you're chasing something that can never be. Pain flickered across his face, but it was gone just as quickly. Alexander Reed was a man who won every battle, and now he had just met the one war he wasn't sure he could win. The war against her fears. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over, not even close. A love she can't afford. Lily sat on the edge of her tiny bed, staring at the wall, her fingers still tingling from where they had touched Alexander. She had kissed him. No, he had kissed her, and she had let it happen. Her heart still raced, her lips still burned from the warmth of his, and her soul, oh her soul, was completely shaken. But it wasn't just the kiss. It was the way he had looked at her, like she was something precious, like she was his. Tears pricked at her eyes. She couldn't afford to feel this way. Not when she had spent her whole life learning that love wasn't meant for people like her. Not when she knew how this story would end. Because it always did. People like him didn't end up with people like her. A man who won't let go. Alexander sat in his penthouse, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the city skyline, but all he saw was her. Lily, the way she had trembled in his arms, the way she had kissed him back. He should have felt victorious. He had won countless business battles, had taken down competitors without breaking a sweat, but this was the first time he had ever felt powerless. Because Lily wasn't some deal to be closed. She was everything, and she was slipping away. His fingers tightened around the glass. No, not this time. He had lost too much in his life. He wasn't about to lose her. An unexpected encounter. The next evening, Lily stood at her candy stall, trying to pretend everything was normal. But her hands weren't steady, and her heart wasn't either. She had spent the whole day convincing herself that the kiss had been a mistake, that she had to forget, that she had to keep moving forward, even if every step felt like walking away from something her soul ached for. But then a sleek black car pulled up across the street. Her breath caught as she saw him. Alexander stepped out, dressed in his usual tailored suit, his presence commanding even in the midst of a bustling street. Lily's stomach twisted. He was here, and he wasn't alone. A stunning blonde woman stepped out of the car beside him, her manicured fingers brushing against his arm, as she laughed at something he said. Lily felt the ground shift beneath her. Who is she? She didn't want to care, but she did. Oh God, she did. Alexander's eyes finally met hers, and in that moment, something unreadable passed between them. Regret, guilt, or was she imagining it? Her hands clenched into fists. She had been right all along. This was his world, a world full of beautiful women, luxury and charm. She had been a fool to think, even for a second, that she could be part of it. Before he could say a word, before he could even reach her, she turned away, and this time, she didn't run, she simply disappeared. A storm he didn't see coming. Alexander didn't know what had just happened. One moment, he was about to walk toward her. The next she was gone, vanished into the crowd like a ghost. He ran a frustrated hand through his hair, barely hearing the woman beside him. Alex, you're not even listening, she pouted. He exhaled sharply. Madeline, I told you this was just a business dinner. Don't read into it. She rolled her eyes. Relax, I know that. But who's the girl you were staring at? Alexander turned his gaze back toward where Lily had been, his heart clenching. She's no one, he lied, because if he admitted what she really was, it would ruin him. But as he got back into the car, a sickening feeling settled in his chest. He had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he didn't even know how to fix it. Running from love, Lily's feet moved before she could think. The moment she saw Alexander with that beautiful woman, something inside her shattered. She didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stay. She couldn't stand there and pretend like it didn't hurt, like seeing him with someone else didn't rip her apart. She had been so stupid. She had let herself believe, for just a moment, that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her in his world. But tonight had been a cruel reminder. She was nothing but a girl who sold candy on the streets. And he belonged to a world she would never fit into. Tears blurred her vision as she slipped into a small alley, pressing her back against the cold brick wall. Her chest ached. She had never let herself dream before, and now she knew why. Because dreams only ever ended in heartbreak. The storm inside him. Alexander didn't sleep that night. He sat in his dark penthouse, staring at the ceiling, playing the moment over and over again in his mind. The look in Lily's eyes, the way she turned away from him without a word, the pain in her expression, pain that he had put there. It made him sick. He grabbed his phone, dialing her number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. His jaw clenched. She was shutting him out. But did she really think that would stop him? Not a chance. The next morning, before the sun had even fully risen, he was out the door. He needed to find her. And this time, he wouldn't let her slip away. A confrontation filled with fire. Lily was setting up her candy stall when she felt it. A presence. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. Her hands trembled as she placed a handful of caramel candies on display, forcing herself to ignore the shadow looming beside her. Lily, his voice was deep, rough, desperate. She swallowed hard. You shouldn't be here, Alexander. He exhaled sharply. We need to talk. She finally turned to face him, her brown eyes burning with pain. About what? She whispered. About how foolish I was to think you were different. About how I let myself believe that. She stopped herself, biting down on her trembling lip. Alexander stepped closer. Lily, what you saw last night was exactly what I needed to see. He stiffened. No, you're wrong. She let out a bitter laugh. Am I? You were with someone else, Alexander. And I was nothing to you. His hands curled into fists. Nothing. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You think you're nothing to me? Lily forced herself to hold his gaze, even though every part of her was shaking. Aren't I? He ran a frustrated hand through his hair. Damn it, Lily. That woman, Madeline, she's not what you think. She's an old family acquaintance. A business deal. That's it. Lily's breath hitched. Then why didn't you tell me that last night? His face twisted with frustration. Because I didn't think you'd run. Silence stretched between them. And then I had to run. Her voice was barely a whisper now. He took a shaky breath. Why? Tears welled in her eyes. And for the first time, she let herself speak the truth. Because I love you. His breath caught. But I can't be part of your world, Alexander, she whispered. And you don't belong in mine. She turned away. But before she could take another step, his hands were on her arms, spinning her back around. His eyes burned into hers, filled with something raw and unbreakable. Who the hell told you I care about worlds? Her lips parted, but no words came out. I love you, Lily, he said fiercely. Not where you come from. Not where you think you belong. Just you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Alexander. But he wasn't done. His hands cupped her face, his touch gentle yet firm. You are not running away from me again. And then he kissed her. Not a soft, hesitant kiss, but a kiss full of fire, full of desperation, full of love. Lily gasped against his lips. But the moment he pulled her closer, she melted. This was real. This was everything. She clung to him, kissing him back with every ounce of longing, of fear, of hope that she had buried for so long. When they finally pulled apart, she was breathless. Alexander pressed his forehead against hers. Say it again, he murmured. She swallowed hard. What? That you love me? His voice was raw, vulnerable. Say it again. Lily closed her eyes, inhaling deeply before whispering. I love you. A slow, beautiful smile spread across his lips. And I love you, Lily, more than you will ever know. Her heart soared. Maybe, just maybe, this love wasn't impossible after all. But happy endings don't come easy. Just as the world seemed to make sense again, a voice interrupted them. Well, isn't this interesting? Lily and Alexander turned sharply. Standing just a few feet away was a man in an expensive suit, his eyes filled with amusement, and in his hand, a small file. Alexander's face darkened. What the hell do you want, Victor?
Lily frowned. Who is he?
Victor smirked. Oh, darling, I'm just a man with a little information. He waved the file slightly. Information that might just destroy everything. Lily's heart dropped. Alexander stepped in front of her protectively. Don't test me, Victor. Victor chuckled. Oh, I'm not testing you. I'm warning you. He threw the file at Alexander's feet. You might love her, Reed, but love isn't always enough. Then with one last smirk, he turned and walked away. The moment he was gone, Lily bent down and picked up the file, with trembling hands. Her breath hitched as she flipped it open. And then she went still, her face drained of color. Alexander saw the look on her face, and reached for her. Lily, what? But she took a step back. Her eyes were wide, her entire body shaking. I have to go. And before he could stop her, she ran, again. And this time, Alexander had no idea if she was ever coming back. A heart shattered once again. Lily ran, her legs trembled, her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The moment she saw what was inside that file, the world she had just started to believe in, the love she had just accepted, came crashing down. Tears streamed down her face as she turned into an empty alley, pressing her back against the cold wall, trying to breathe, but she couldn't. Because in that file were secrets she had buried long ago.
Secrets that could destroy everything.
Her hands shook as she clutched the papers to her chest. How did Victor find this? How did Alexander not know? Would he hate her now? Would he see her differently? The thought made her stomach twist. She had fought to forget her past, but the past never really forgets you. Alexander's desperation. Alexander stood frozen in place, his jaw clenched as he stared at the empty space where Lily had just been. She ran again, but this time, it felt different. This wasn't just pain. This was fear. A bone-deep terror in her eyes. like she had just seen a ghost from her worst nightmare. His hands curled into fists as he turned his gaze to the file. Victor had dropped. Slowly he bent down and picked it up. The moment he flipped it open, his breath caught, and then everything inside him went cold.
Healy Williams.
Former name Lillian Carter. Case file #4872. Missing person report status. Escaped. His hands tightened around the papers. Escaped? His mind raced, scanning the details. And then he saw it. A name. One that sent ice through his veins. Raymond Carter. His stomach twisted. He knew that name. Everyone in the city did. Raymond Carter was a monster. A man who had been arrested years ago for human trafficking, illegal businesses, and violence beyond imagination. And Lily was his daughter. Alexander's heartbeat pounded in his ears. She had never told him, not once. And now she was running, not from him, but from the truth. His jaw clenched. There was no way in hell he was letting her go this time. Hunting down his love. Alexander spent hours searching for her. He called, texted, nothing. She had vanished. But he knew Lily. She didn't have anywhere to go. So where would she run when she was in pain? Then it hit him. The abandoned bookstore. The place she had told him once that she used to go as a child, to escape the noise of the world. Without wasting another second, he jumped into his car and sped through the city. When he reached the bookstore, his heart clenched at the sight before him. Lily was sitting on the floor, curled into herself, hugging her knees. She looked so small, so fragile, like a girl who had been running her entire life. He stepped forward. She flinched at the sound of his shoes on the wooden floor. Go away, she whispered, not looking at him. He didn't move. Not happening, he said, his voice firm.
Healy let out a broken laugh.
Why do you keep chasing me, Alexander? He took another step. Because I love you. Her breath hitched. You don't understand, she whispered. If you stay near me, you'll get hurt. Alexander knelt in front of her, his hand reaching out to cup her cheek. Lily, he said softly, forcing her to look at him. Her eyes were filled with tears. Did he hurt you? A sharp intake of breath. Then she closed her eyes, biting her lip so hard it almost bled. Alexander's jaw clenched. Lily, he said again, his voice shaking with rage and pain. Did he hurt you? Tears rolled down her cheeks as she nodded, and something inside Alexander snapped. A billionaire's promise. He should have known. He should have realized sooner.
Healy wasn't just a girl selling candy on the streets.
She was a girl hiding, running from a past so dark it had nearly destroyed her. But she wasn't alone anymore. Not anymore. Alexander cupped her face with both hands, his thumb brushing away her tears. I don't care what's in that file, he murmured. Lily opened her eyes, shock flashing in them. But I don't care. His voice was fierce, unyielding, desperate. She shook her head. You should care, Alexander. My father. I'm not afraid of him, he interrupted. Her lips parted. He leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. You listen to me, Lily. No one is taking you from me. Her hands clenched his shirt. You can't promise that. His grip tightened around her waist, pulling her into him. Watch me. Lily choked on a sob. Alexander. He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering. You belong with me. No past, no name, no damn file is going to change that. She collapsed into his arms, burying her face in his chest. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. But the darkness isn't done yet. Just as Alexander was about to lead her out, his phone buzzed. He frowned, pulling it out. A blocked number. Something in his gut twisted. He answered. A deep, slow chuckle filled the line. Hello, Reed. Alexander went rigid. He knew that voice. Lily's body stiffened against him. She had heard it too. Raymond Carter. The monster himself. The voice on the phone was calm. Too calm. I hear you've taken a liking to my little girl. Alexander's grip tightened around Lily. If you come near her, Raymond laughed. Relax, Reed. I'm not unreasonable. There was a pause. Then, how about a deal? Alexander's breath stilled.
Oh!
He repeated coldly. Raymond's voice darkened. You walk away from my daughter, and I'll let her live, Hilly gasped.
Oh!
Alexander's eyes burned with rage. And just like that, the battle for love had truly begun.
Eee!
He, deal with the devil. Alexander's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. His blood boiled at the sound of Raymond Carter's voice. Cold, calculating, threatening. Lily trembled against him, her fingers digging into his jacket. He could feel her fear, her silent plea, but he wasn't going to let this monster win. Raymond chuckled on the other end. I'm a reasonable man, Reed. I don't want trouble. You're a smart guy. You know when to walk away. Alexander's jaw clenched. And if I don't? There was a pause. Then, Raymond's voice dropped to a chilling whisper.
Eee!
Then I'll make sure Lily disappears forever. This time, there won't be an escape. Lily's breath hitched, her entire body going rigid. Alexander saw the terror in her eyes, the way she flinched at her father's words. He knew what this meant. Raymond had found her again, and that meant danger was closer than they thought. He had to act fast, his very, very fast.
Eee!
Taking a deep breath, Alexander forced himself to sound calm. Where do you want to meet? Lily snapped her head up, her eyes wide with panic. She shook her head furiously in grabbing onto his arm. No, she whispered. Please don't. But Alexander had already made his decision. Good choice, Raymond said smoothly.
You.
Midnight.
Eee! The old docks.
Come alone, Reed, or the deal's off. The line went dead. For a long moment there was silence. Then, Lily shoved at his chest, her eyes burning with a mixture of fear and anger. What are you doing? He cupped her face gently, protecting you. Tears welled up in her eyes. By walking into a trap, Alexander shook his head. By ending this, she shook her head frantically, gripping his shirt. You don't understand. My father, he's not just a criminal. He owns people. He plays mind games. If you go there, you won't just be fighting him. You'll be fighting an entire empire. Alexander's expression darkened. Then I'll burn his empire to the ground. Lily's lip trembled. Alex. He leaned in, pressing a slow, lingering kiss to her forehead. Trust me. She swallowed hard, closing her eyes, as more tears slipped down her cheeks. But she knew. There was no stopping him. Midnight at the docks. The air was thick with tension. The moon cast eerie shadows over the empty shipping containers, the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore echoing through the night. Alexander stepped forward, his footsteps slow, deliberate. He wasn't afraid, he was furious. A black car was already parked near the edge of the dock. Two men in dark suits stood beside it, their expressions cold and unreadable. And then, a figure stepped out of the car. Raymond Carter, dressed in an expensive suit, his salt and pepper hair slicked back. He looked like a man who had never lost a battle in his life. But tonight, Alexander was ready to change that. Raymond smirked. You actually came. Alexander crossed his arms. Let's skip the small talk. You said you wanted a deal. Raymond took a slow step forward. I did, but first I wanted to see what kind of man you are. He studied Alexander like a hunter observing prey. And now I know. You're stubborn, reckless, willing to die for a girl who's never told you the whole truth. Alexander's expression remained unreadable. I don't need to know her past to love her. Raymond chuckled. Ah, love, such a fragile thing. Let's test how strong yours really is. He snapped his fingers. One of the bodyguards opened the car door, and Lily was dragged out. Her hands were tied, her lips parted in shock, as she gasped at the sight of Alexander. No, she screamed. Alex, leave, it's a trap. Raymond grabbed her chin harshly, silencing her. Alexander's vision turned red. I wouldn't do anything stupid, Reed, Raymond mused. One wrong move, and Lily won't see another sunrise. Alexander took a slow, controlled breath. Let her go. Raymond tilted his head. You really don't understand how this works, do you? I own her. She belongs to me. Alexander's jaw clenched. She's not yours. She never was. Raymond smirked. Then, let's make this simple. He pulled out a small silver gun and placed it against Lily's temple. Alexander's heart stopped. I'll give you a choice, Reed, Raymond said, his voice almost bored. You walk away, and Lily lives. She comes with me, where she belongs. You forget she ever existed. Lily shook her head violently, her eyes filled with horror. Or Raymond continued, pressing the gun harder against her skin. You fight me, and she dies right here, in your arms. Silence. A deadly, suffocating silence. Alexander's hands curled into fists. There was only one option, and it wasn't walking away. Love's final stand, Raymond smirked, sensing victory. So, what's it going to be? Alexander exhaled slowly. Then, he moved, faster than anyone expected. A sharp punch to the guard beside him sent the man stumbling back. In the same movement, Alexander grabbed a metal rod, lying nearby, and swung. The second guard collapsed. Raymond's smirk faded. Alexander took a step forward. Let her go. Raymond's fingers twitched around the trigger. Lily gasped. Alex, don't. Before Raymond could react, Alexander lunged, grabbing his wrist and twisting it. A gunshot echoed through the night, but it missed. Lily screamed as Raymond staggered back. Alexander didn't stop. A brutal punch to Raymond's jaw sent him crashing to the ground. Lily broke free, stumbling into Alexander's arms. She clung to him, shaking violently. I thought I'd lose you, she sobbed. He cupped her face, pressing his forehead to hers. I told you, Lily, I'm never letting you go. She sobbed harder, her fingers curling into his shirt. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Raymond groaned on the ground, defeated. It was over. Finally, completely over. Alexander lifted Lily into his arms, holding her as if she was the most precious thing in the world. And in that moment, she was. Freedom never felt this real. The flashing red and blue lights painted the night sky as the police swarmed the docks, handcuffing Raymond Carter and his men. His face was twisted in fury, but there was nothing he could do now. Lily clung to Alexander's chest, her entire body trembling as she buried her face in his shoulder. He ran his hand up and down her back, whispering, "It's over, sweetheart. You're safe." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she pulled back just enough to look at him. I was so scared. Her voice cracked. I thought I'd lose you. Alexander cupped her face, his thumb gently wiping away her tears. I promised you, Lily, no one will ever take you from me. His voice was raw with emotion. She gazed at him, those beautiful deep eyes full of love and pain. But what if something happens again? What if? He silenced her with a soft kiss, pouring every ounce of reassurance, love, and devotion into it. His lips moved against hers, with slow, aching tenderness, as if he was sealing his promise with that kiss. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. No more what if. We've been through hell and back, and we're still here, together. Lily let out a small, shaky breath, and then, for the first time in years, she smiled. A real, genuine smile. Because for the first time in her life, she was free. A love that feels like home. The days that followed felt like a dream. With Raymond behind bars, Lily no longer had to look over her shoulder. The fear that had been a shadow in her life for so long was finally gone. But the real magic, the love that blossomed between her and Alexander. One morning, she woke up in his penthouse, sunlight spilling through the curtains. She stretched and turned, only to find him already awake, watching her with a soft, lazy smile. You're staring, she teased. He chuckled, tracing a gentle finger down her cheek. Can you blame me? You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She blushed, burying her face in the pillow. Stop it. He laughed, pulling her into his arms. Never, she sighed happily, nuzzling into his warmth. I still can't believe this is real, that we're real. Alexander kissed the top of her head. Believe it, because I'm never letting you go. Lily looked up at him, her heart swelling. I love you, Alex. His eyes softened, a rare vulnerability shining through. I love you too, Lily, more than I ever thought possible. She reached up, pulling him down for a slow, breathtaking kiss. And in that moment, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. A grand gesture of forever days turned into weeks. Their love deepened, growing stronger, with every whispered confession, every lingering touch. And then, one evening, Alexander asked her to go out with him. Lily thought it was just a simple date, but when they arrived, she gasped. He had taken her to a stunning rooftop, covered in thousands of twinkling fairy lights. A breathtaking view of the city stretched below, but the only thing more beautiful was the way Alexander was looking at her. Her heart pounded as he led her to the center, where a small velvet box rested on the table. Tears welled in her eyes before he even spoke. Alexander got down on one knee, his hands slightly shaking, the mighty billionaire, nervous before the woman he loved. Lily, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you changed my life. You showed me a kind of love I never knew existed, and I don't ever want to spend another day without you. She covered her mouth, her whole body trembling. He opened the box, revealing a breathtaking ring. Marry me, Lily. A sob escaped her lips as she nodded frantically. Yes, oh my God, yes. Alexander laughed, slipping the ring onto her finger, before pulling her into the most passionate kiss of their lives. And in that moment, under the stars, with the city glowing below them, they knew their love story was just beginning.